Hello, my name is David Ramsey, and I am a veterinary ophthalmologist and a member of the American College of Veterinary Ophthalmologists. The purpose of this video is to show the process of creating a new bronze Horus sculpture for the ACVO. You see, each year the ACVO honors the outgoing president with a sculpture of Horus at Edfu, which serves as a token of appreciation for their service to the college. Horus is the falcon god of ancient Egypt and is also the logo of the ACVO, which was a concept developed by Dr. Roy Bellhorn, a founding member of the American College of Veterinary Ophthalmologists. Two previous versions of Horus were created for the ACVO. The first version was created in 1971 by Chester Nicodemus and was cast in clay. The inventory of this first version was depleted in 1990. The second version of Horus was created in 1990 by Mr. Ross Madison, and this was cast in bronze, and by 2022, none of the Madison bronze Horus sculptures remained. So in 2022, the ACVO began discussing another version of Horus. I offered to design and create the new Horus sculpture, and I was honored to have been selected by the ACVO Board of Regents for this task. I sculpted the third iteration of Horus in clay to serve as a model for producing bronzes, and for this sculpture I created a pitted surface texture to simulate an ancient Egyptian antique appearance. Here the shent, or double crown, has been sculpted and is being attached to the head of the Horus sculpture. The lost wax process of metal casting, which is also known as investment casting, has been in existence for over 6,000 years and was used to produce the ACVO's bronze Horus sculptures. Briefly, the lost wax process requires making a mold of the original clay sculpture, and then from that mold creating a wax replica of the art form, encasing it in silica shell, which is referred to as the investment, and firing it in a kiln which melts and drains away the wax within it, which is the so-called lost wax process. This leaves a hollow cavity within the ceramic shell into which molten bronze metal can then be poured to create a bronze sculpture. And now I'll demonstrate the steps in this process in more detail. The first step in the process requires making a mold of the original clay Horus sculpture. The mold consists of two different parts. First, an inner layer made of a flexible silicone rubber, and an outer layer called the mother mold, which is composed of epoxy and serves to support and protect the inner silicone mold. The silicone rubber mold is made by painting the surface of the clay sculpture with 6 coats of silicone rubber. This silicone rubber mold captures every minute detail in the original Horus sculpture, including tool marks, rake marks, and even fingerprints left in the clay. Once the silicone rubber cures, the mold remains very flexible and will not retain its shape once it is removed from the clay sculpture. The silicone mold is left covering the clay sculpture, and then the mother mold is formed over the surface of the silicone mold. The mother mold is very rigid and maintains the shape of the silicone mold. The mother mold is designed in 2 parts so that each half can be removed to access the silicone mold. The mother mold is then removed, and the silicone mold is then gently peeled off the clay Horus sculpture. The clay Horus sculpture is then discarded, and the mother mold is rejoined, leaving an exact negative space in the form of the original clay Horus sculpture. The mold is then used to create a positive wax replica of the clay Horus sculpture. The mold is inverted to reveal the hollow cavity previously occupied by the sculpture, and molten wax is then poured into the cavity. The mold is then rotated and jostled to distribute the molten wax so that all surfaces are covered. Excess wax is then poured out, leaving a thin layer of wax within the mold. After the first wax pour coat has solidified, this process is repeated 3 more times to build up a hollow wax casting wall thickness of approximately 3/16 of an inch. Once the wax is solidified inside the mold, the mother mold and silicone mold are then removed, revealing a thin-walled and hollow wax cast replica of the clay Horus sculpture. The next step in this process involves removing all imperfections that are present in the wax replica, and this is referred to as wax chasing. The goal of wax chasing is to create an exact wax replica of the original Horus sculpture. This includes removing all air or wax bubbles that are present, wax scabs, and mold parting lines referred to as seam lines where the silicone mold separates. Here, wax chasing is being performed to remove a seam line in a wax form. In this image, a defect in the wax beak can be seen. Once the wax replica is finished, it must then be prepared for investment in a silica shell by gating the wax Horus. Wax columns, also called sprues, are connected to the wax hollow form. These wax columns establish pore channels and pathways for molten bronze metal to enter and flow through the investment, and vents for air to escape from inside the mold as it is displaced by the molten bronze metal during the pouring process. Once the gates or sprues are attached, they are then wax welded to the wax Horus and to the wax base. The base will serve as a pour platform for molten bronze metal. All the wax will eventually be melted out, leaving a negative space which eventually will be replaced by bronze. Finally, a metal rod is attached to the base of the wax platform, which permits handling of the wax sculpture during the next part of the process. The wax sculpture is finally ready for investment in a silica sand shell. The wax sculpture is inverted and dipped into a slurry liquid of silica to coat the entire inner and outer surfaces of the wax Horus. The wax sculpture is then dusted with a very fine silica sand powder, which sticks to the slurry and coats the inner and outer surfaces of the wax sculpture, creating the first investment coat. Once the first investment coat is air-dried, this process is repeated many times to build up a silica shell of approximately 1/2 an inch in thickness that covers and invests the exterior surface as well as the interior hollow surface of the wax sculpture. The next step in the process is referred to burnout, which is firing the silica shell to melt out the wax and to harden the shell. The wax replica, which is covered by silica shell, is placed in a kiln and is fired at 1,650 degrees Fahrenheit. This rapidly melts out the wax, fulfilling the lost wax title, and leaves a 3/16 inch hollow cavity that was previously occupied by the wax replica. The wax gates and vents and base are also melted out. The hollow cavity will eventually be occupied by bronze. Kiln firing also vitrifies the silica shell, meaning when the silica shell is heated to this temperature, the heating process hardens the silica and converts it into a hard ceramic shell. The hardened ceramic shell is then able to withstand the molten bronze when it is poured into the ceramic shell. The ceramic shell is then removed from the kiln and is allowed to cool and is inspected for any cracks or imperfections which must be repaired. The ceramic shell is then returned to the kiln and is heated to 1,650 degrees Fahrenheit. Reheating the shell prevents it from cracking when molten bronze is poured into the shell and also aids in the flow of molten bronze. While the ceramic shell is reaching the correct temperature in the kiln, solid bronze metal is placed in a crucible and is heated to 2,060 degrees Fahrenheit in a melting furnace until the bronze becomes molten. Now, while the bronze is becoming molten in the melting furnace, the ceramic shell is removed from the kiln and positioned and balanced upside down in a pouring trough. The crucible, which contains molten bronze, is then removed from the melting furnace, grasped and lifted with pouring tongs, and liquid bronze is then poured into each ceramic shell investment. The bronze glows red as it solidifies inside the ceramic investment. And as the bronze cools, it begins to turn a dark gray color. Since metals expand when they are heated and contract when they cool, shrinkage of the bronze may cause cracking or splintering of the ceramic shell investment as it cools. The ceramic encased bronze sculpture is allowed to cool for several hours. Each ceramic investment must be destroyed to access the bronze sculpture contained within it. Once it is cooled, the ceramic is chipped away, revealing the rough bronze casting. An air chisel is used to remove ceramic from the inner hollow cavity and the outer surface of the bronze sculpture. In this image, 6 layers of ceramic investment covering the raw bronze form can be seen. Once all the ceramic investment has been removed, gating channels and vents, which are now composed of solid bronze, must be removed by cutting or grinding them from the sculpture. Here, the lower sides of the sculpture base are being removed using a plasma cutter to shorten the base to the desired height. The sculpture is then sandblasted to remove small particles of remaining ceramic shell and to restore the bronze metal to its raw form. The bronze sculpture is then ready for the next step, which is called metal chasing. Now, like wax chasing, metal chasing involves removing all imperfections in the bronze sculpture from gating or sprue attachments, metal shrinkage artifacts that developed, filling voids in the bronze metal, correcting other induced defects that occur during the metal pouring process, and restoring the artist's surface texture and form. Here, a defect in the beak of the bronze sculpture is being repaired. The next step is the application of patina to the bronze metal surface. Now, on metal, patina refers to applying various chemical compounds such as oxides, carbonates, or sulfides to the surface of the raw bronze metal. This is how raw bronze appears before patina is applied. Patination produces very distinct colors and tones on the sculpture. The French brown patina shown here was selected by the ACVO Board of Regents for the Horus sculptures. For the French brown patina, liver of sulfate is initially sprayed on the bronze sculpture, which darkens the bronze. Once it is oxidized and is darkened, the surface is rubbed with a Scotch-Brite pad to remove some of the darkened areas and to highlight the raw bronze metal color in selected areas. The bronze sculpture is then heated to 190 degrees Fahrenheit using a torch, which is the catalyst driving the oxidation of the patina. An infrared temperature gun is used to assure the correct temperature before ferric nitrate liquid is sprayed or painted on to produce the desired colors and tones in the Horus sculpture. Finally, the sculpture is coated with lacquer to protect and preserve the patina colors and tones, and the Horus sculpture is mounted on a granite base. The entire process of lost wax casting must be repeated for each sculpture, since each lost wax casting process only furnishes a single bronze sculpture. This process was repeated 25 times for the ACVO's edition of Horus bronzes, and as you have seen, the lost wax process of bronze metal casting is a laborious and time-consuming process that requires the skills of foundry workers to achieve. However, the results of the entire process and the end result of this fine artwork are striking and are certainly worth it. The ACVO would like to thank Roger Smith and Michigan Art Castings for their exceptional craftsmanship.